Hello everyone, welcome to Out of Spec Reviews. I'm Ryan, and today we've got a 2024 Polestar 2 Performance, and we're going to be taking it on our 10% challenge. And this is essentially a road trip simulation type test. How far can you go with 15 minutes of charging? So let me tell you a little bit about the Polestar 2 and a little bit about our testing procedures. This is the 2024 Polestar 2 Performance, and it's had a few updates. This year, it received new motors, a new rear motor and a new induction front motor. That motor can disconnect to help improve efficiency. Additionally, the rear motor is now more powerful than before. Interestingly, total system output is down by just a little bit. You can see here it says 335 kilowatts, where the previous version was 350 kilowatts. However, those 350 kilowatts were split equally between front and rear. Here we have a rear bias, which, at least to me, is preferable, and it also improves upon the 0 to 60 time, despite having a little bit less power. The 2024 Polestar 2 Performance has the same battery as the previous Polestar 2. It's a 78 kilowatt hour battery, and it has a peak charging rate of about 150 kilowatts. Unfortunately, the charging curve is not the greatest. Interestingly, there's also a new rear-wheel drive long-range Polestar 2, and that actually has a new battery. It's a little bit bigger with 82 kilowatt hours and peak charging speeds of 200 kilowatts. So a nice little upgrade, but unfortunately, we do not have that here with the Polestar 2 Performance. And to tell you a little bit more about this, we've got, of course, with the Performance, 20-inch wheels, Continental Sport Contact 6 tires. It's rated for an EPA 247 miles. You're joining me inside the Polestar 2 Performance, and I want to tell you a little bit about the 10% challenge. This is our road trip simulation test. The first thing that we do is set the tires to the factory recommended pressures. I went ahead and did that this morning. Next, we run the car down to 10% state of charge. We chose this because not everyone wants to run their car down to 1 or 0% when they're on a road trip, and 10% gives you a reasonable buffer. So we're at 10% and we're going to go ahead and plug into the charger right behind us. However, of course, charging doesn't start the moment you plug in. There's a bit of delay between when you plug in and when you start charging. That's called the handshake time, and we record that separately. Once it starts charging, we're then going to charge for precisely 15 minutes. Again, we chose 15 minutes because we think that this is a pretty realistic and reasonable amount of time for a charging stop. It's enough for you to get out, stretch your legs, use the restroom if you need to, but it's not so much time that you feel like you're just sitting around waiting. While the vehicle's charging, we're going to have climate control running because, again, we think that this is pretty realistic. A lot of people spend time in their car when they're charging, just hanging out, and they use climate control. After 15 minutes of charging, we're going to go ahead, unplug, and then head onto the highway. Of course, like always, we'll use gentle acceleration to get up to 80 miles per hour, and that's an 80 miles per hour GPS speed. We use gentle acceleration to avoid any losses, converting the battery energy into power. We're then going to head along the highway, maintaining 80 miles an hour. We'll avoid drafting any other vehicle and keep our climate control running between 68 and 72 on the Eco Auto setting. Once we've used about half of the replenished battery, we're then going to go ahead and turn around and head back toward this charger. We're going to put the charger in as a destination so that it preconditions the battery, but we're actually going to stay on the highway. Once we move over from 11% state of charge down to 10%, that's going to be our result. That's our number for the 10% challenge. We're at 10% state of charge, so let's go ahead and plug in. I'm going to go ahead and start it up, record the handshake time, and you'll join me shortly. We're successfully charging after a 35-second handshake, which is actually on the shorter side for CCS vehicles. As you can see, we're getting the full 150 kilowatts, and we're going to go ahead and charge for 15 minutes. Of course, have the climate control running and see how far we can get. Inside the car, we're seeing a peak charging speed of 157 kilowatts, which is actually quite solid. 5 minutes in, we're almost at 25% state of charge and 12.7 kilowatt hours. Still doing pretty close to the peak at 148 kilowatts. Again, the peak we saw was 157, so this is pretty solid. About halfway through, and we're starting to see a taper, 136 kilowatts at only 31%. That's not too far off the peak, but it's a bummer to see the taper starting so early. And as you can see, it's continuing to ramp down. Unfortunate, not a super great charging curve, but we'll see how far we can get. As you can see, power dropped to about 108 kilowatts. A successful 15-minute charge delivered 33.7 kilowatt hours, which is good, but not great. You're joining me as I merge onto the toll road. We're going to do a gentle acceleration up to 80 miles an hour, aiming to hit 80 at the end of this lane, the merging lane. And of course, the gentle accelerations help minimize losses through the powertrain. And there we go. I went ahead and verified 80 miles per hour indicated is 80 miles per hour GPS speed. Now I charged up to 49%, which means I should turn around somewhere around 30% state of charge in order to reach 10% when I get to that same exit. I'm exiting the highway. I've got 29% state of charge, and of course I'm using regenerative braking to put as much energy as possible back into the battery pack. Here are some of the stats. Only 36 miles so far, so we'll see how far we can get. And again, I just use regenerative brakes there, no friction brakes, and I'll accelerate very gently back onto the toll road. Merging back onto the toll road, and again, just another gentle acceleration up to 80 miles per hour indicated, which is actually 80 miles per hour GPS speed. We just passed the exit, so we're at nice 69 miles, and we still have 16% battery, so a little bit left to go. And we might end up doing another loop around. You're joining me as I remerge onto the highway for the final time. I'm at 13% state of charge, and we're just gonna run it down from 11 to 10. And of course, like usual, just a gentle acceleration up to 80 miles an hour here. You just saw it tick over from 11 to 10%, and that's it. 81 miles. Now, that's okay, but let's take a moment and look at this data a little bit closer and put it in some context with some other comparable vehicles. We saw 81 miles on this 10% challenge, which is perfectly average. Plenty of vehicles doing better and plenty doing worse. We also saw 33.7 kilowatt hours delivered in 15 minutes, which is again, very average. Plenty of vehicles, especially those with smaller batteries, had less energy delivered, such as the Volkswagen ID4 rear-wheel drive, Tesla Model Y all-wheel drive, or the Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive. However, it didn't quite match the energy delivered for vehicles with bigger batteries, such as the Audi e-tron or Volkswagen ID4 all-wheel drive. And it certainly didn't come very close to energy delivered for 800-volt architecture vehicles, including the Hyundai Ioniq 6, Porsche Taycan, and Lucid Air. One thing I found pretty interesting was that this 10% challenge represented a pretty well-optimized road trip stop for a Polestar 2. In our range test, we saw turtle mode started at 8%, and it was really pretty unusable below 6%, so I think it's pretty unlikely for people to roll up to chargers at 1% state of charge. Additionally, the charging curve tapers very aggressively above 50% state of charge, and we nearly reached that state of charge after 15 minutes. So again, this is nearly perfectly optimized for a road trip stop. When we consider it that way and think of it as 15 minutes of charging will get you about an hour of driving at 80 miles an hour, I think that's pretty reasonable. Perfectly respectable, but nothing to write home about. Well, I'm interested to hear what you guys all have to say and what you think of this result. Looking forward to seeing you guys on the next one.